Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you guys being here. We're really excited. So I'm just going to introduce Jade Powers real quick, and then we'll go on to our talk. So Jade Powers is the assistant curator at the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art in Kansas City, Missouri, where she organizes exhibitions including Deconstructing Marcus Jansen, Abstracted Wonders, The Power of Lines, Color Application, Child Play and Exploration of Adolescence, Atrium Project, Joidi Minaya, and Dawood Bey, selections from The Night Coming Tenderly, Black. Before joining the Kemper Museum, Powers was the 2017 to 2018 Romare Beard and Graduate Museum Fellow at the St. Louis Art Museum. There, Powers curated the first museum-wide gallery guide to comprehensively highlight works by artists of African descent. Powers has also been visiting critic at the Kansas City Art Institute, University of Kansas, and Washington University St. Louis, as well as juror for several artist awards. Powers is currently the visiting lecturer for the MFA graduate seminar in the Department of Visual Arts for the 2020 to 2021 academic year of at the University of Kansas. Without further ado, I give you Jade Powers.
Hello, thank you so much. Thank you, Isabel, for such a wonderful introduction. And also thank you, Marissa. I want to thank all of you also for attending today and for submitting work, and to congratulate you for having such strong work in this exhibition. So let me share my screen. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Okay, wonderful. All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. Before I do, I just want to say thank you so much to KCAC for all the wonderful work that you do for artists in Kansas City and all around. So I'll talk a little bit about the process of during this exhibition, and I'll say I have a presentation and flow, but please feel free to interject with questions if you have them. And then also at the end, we can have time for questions as well. So the process, Isabel and Marissa reached out to me to jury this exhibition, and I was really excited about it. I'm always happy and excited by the chance to see what young artists are doing, what artists are doing at the collegiate level. It's really, helpful for me to keep my thought process ever changing. So I feel, that what's being taught at the college level just really grows as you grow as an artist. So I'm always excited to see when those themes or the ideas are, what's similar to what I'm thinking about and reading about. So I'm always excited to be able to jury shows, and then also to see work from students, as my job oftentimes doesn't, right now I'm working at KU, so I am, seeing graduate student work, but most of them are based in Kansas. So it's really nice to see, what's going on in the KC metro area. So, there were 72 participants, and from those participants, I was able to choose between 40 and 45 works. There are 43 works in the show. And I must say, it was really challenging. There were some really wonderful submissions that made my job really hard. But I think it's hard in a rewarding way, and that it's like, oh man, maybe this work doesn't fit with the theme, but this person is really close. So that's always exciting. And what I'll say about the works that are in this show is that, they really show exceptional skill, promise, and innovation. And so on the next slides, I'll highlight some themes that I feel like carry throughout the exhibition. And what I'll say is that there are several works that, can belong in different theme boxes if there were such a thing, but hopefully, as I'm showing you this, you'll get a feel for what I was thinking. So the first theme is the body. And so I really appreciated the works that I have put in this thematic category, um, because of the way that there's this examination of the body, and the way that there's also an examination of the full body, but then also portions of the body. So thinking also about body parts and how they are proportionate, and what it means to only show a portion of that body, and the intimacy, or like the ability to understand a portion of the story, but not the entire story when you're not given the full body. And then also in this section, focusing on the face, and maybe, so I guess I should say, in the process, it was blind. So I didn't have, the titles of the work, the medium, the artist names. So, some things like, I was thinking like, oh, could this be a self-portrait? Is this an examination of their face, or thinking about, their experiences, and then how that affects the body and how that's presented on the body. And I think something that also was really exciting is, so I did all of the juring virtually, but coming into the space to see the work, and then thinking about like how my body moves in relationship to these depictions of bodies, and like how I move to make sure I see the work better, or really the way that the show is curated with works on top of each other in the salon style also allows you to move around the works. And then the next connection is woven connections and in threads. And so the truly literally, thinking about fiber-based works, but I think also with this, and I guess maybe the reason that I had this work weave into the next connection is, the three-dimensional quality of quite a few of the works, even though they are on paper or canvas or on a flat surface, I think really helps us think about like threads and three-dimensionality in woven materials and connections. And this work in particular, I remember I thought from the photograph that this was a work on paper. And then so to see it in person, I think that's one of the great things about, being able to see work in person, is you really have an opportunity to see the medium. And then I also think, connections here, thinking about the connection between what I'm reading as like land or rock, and then when it touches the water. And then also here, I really had an appreciation for the threaded details. And if you have an opportunity to come to this space, which I'm imagining you all have, but if not, I hope that you'll see your work up in person, but to really see the threads and the attention to detail on the threads, and then also the like frayed areas here at the bottom. Oops. And then again, really highlighting a truly cotton woven piece, and the attention to detail with color and saturation and pulsating of color in certain areas. And then also this connection. So, no, as far as I know, like, no woven materials, but the connection to history, and also the connection to the future. I read this work as, past misunderstandings and misrepresentations of Native peoples, and then these woven, or not woven, these like threaded pieces to what I'm reading as like futuristic elements. And then also this connection through touch. And so, quite literally, hands touching each other, but then also, interaction through touch, thinking about your own body, thinking about the way that your body reacts to touch. And then similarly, this work, when thinking about touch and like the the barriers that can be broken through intimacy and through, connectedness. And then also, I think something that has been a popular theme as we've all been experiencing COVID and this pandemic is, this idea of rest and examining the everyday. And of course, throughout the history of art, there's been a focus on the everyday. Painters have for centuries painted the everyday, painted still life, but really, I appreciated these works in this section for what I read as like a really close examination and thoughtfulness about what I imagine is what they might see every day, or something that isn't necessarily on its face extraordinary, but the artists have given this space or this area attention to detail as if it were something extraordinary. And so therefore highlighting it and elevating it. And then I also just like an anecdote about me. I live on Southwest Boulevard. And so I don't live far from a few bakeries. And it's always so joyous when I go for my walks to be able to smell the sweet breads that are made at the bakery. And so this, like this has become a routine for me, to get out of the house to walk. And so this is, just another example of every day, and this is what this work makes me think of. And then, I don't know about you all, but I've been doing a lot of sleeping when there's not too much else to do. And so, really thinking about the importance of rest and, the importance of letting your mind stop for a minute and recalibrate. And then, this almost ghostly image of what I'm reading to be a room, like a bedroom, but with, some obvious oddities, like the chair above the, like, not sitting on the floor. And then also what I'm reading as a doorway, but then looks almost like a seascape. And then, really thinking about the beauty of found materials in your everyday. So going on a walk and finding a flower that's in bloom, or, taking up many hobbies, the hobbies of being a plant mom and, watching these plants bloom and blossom. And then also, I imagined this work, you're, walking and you find something that catches your eye, and then being able to photograph it and really think about the throughways. And the same here, thinking about growth. And then thinking about, the everyday playgrounds, things that you pass on a walk. And I think this, I shouldn't have put this line like this. Yes, and then, think of this work, I think I probably should have switched it and thinking about shape. I have a section about shape and like geometrics, and then also like the specialties of the day-to-day, or like the things that you do to make yourself feel special and bright. Yep. And then shapes and angles. And then this is an example of a work that I really appreciate the way Marissa and Isabel placed this. It's on a pedestal and like hanging off the side. It's not the right word, but off of the pedestal a bit. And I think this makes that work, present even more dynamic. And then this really, what I imagine, not only like a focus on geometric shapes and angles, but then also really thinking about color and the way that color can change the way we think, or color can, add to our thought process. And then also angles here. And then not only the angles and shapes of the welded circular pieces, but then also the shape of the entire work, that like cone shape. And then here, this work was another work that was really nice to see in person, but really, being able to dive into this and imagining what all is present. And then these not only circular shapes, but then also the rectangular shapes, and then the texture of the gold velvet areas. And then thinking about text as form. So I'm really excited when artists use text and use text in innovative ways. So the way that this work has been drawn, but then we also we also find a word here, and that can help guide our reading of the work. And then also these 5 works that are installed all vertically on like a side wall. I think it really elevates and helps us to think about what this artist's goals are, but then it's also quite thin, so challenging to read at times. So then you do have to like become one with the work and look closely and think about what each image is about, and then the words help you to reach a conclusion. And then similarly with this work, what I am maybe reading as a sentence or reading as a thought, along with embroidered pieces. And then ideas of intimacy, which I think I was viewing maybe a little bit differently than rest and examinations of the everyday, because each of these works feel like you've walked into the middle of a store. You're not entirely sure what is happening, but whatever is happening is between the figures depicted. And so you're really getting an intimate view, although you might not truly understand, but you're receiving an intimate view. And the same here, you just find yourself intrigued by the works here. You find yourself with questions that, you can decide to answer. You can decide that they belong unanswered, but either way, you've stepped into someone's intimate portion of their life. And same with these last 2 works. And this work as well. And I think, with the works that do contain figures, or like human figures with faces, it's also really interesting that many of the faces are looking to the viewer. So you also feel like you've maybe not encroached their space, but you've walked into something that you're not fully aware of. And that makes these works exciting when thinking about ideas of intimacy. Yes, and I believe that is my last slide. So if anyone has any questions, we can chat.
Yes, if you have any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat box or even just unmute yourself and ask them to Jade directly.
So What did you go to again? What college?
I'm sorry, will you say that again?
I was just wondering, what college did you go to again? Like,
Oh, yeah. So I went to DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana for undergraduate. I studied art history and religious studies. And then I went to Indiana University in Bloomington for my graduate studies. And there I studied religious art, focusing on Indian and Bangladeshi artists, contemporary artists.
nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have plans? What do you plan to do when you're done with your schooling?
Well, I'm at JCCC right now. I've done 2 years, and then I'm gonna do another year and hopefully get a scholarship for the Kansas City Arts Institute.
Oh, wonderful. Great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you're a curator and you talk about different themes, but I was wondering if, like, going into the jurying process, you had a sort of like curatorial vision or thesis, like overarching thesis in mind.
Oh, that's a good question. So no, I didn't. I really tried to let the works guide the theme, or like the different groupings of themes. I feel sometimes if I go in with thematic goals, then that can exclude work. And I like to be able to view all the work on its own merit. And then after the decision has been made, then create themes. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good question. I should have put that in the process section. So thank you for asking.
Yeah.
So I'll ask a question. We have students here at every level in their education process, and I know I look back, I'm in my mid-30s, and if I could have given myself some advice, I would have loved to have heard some things. Is there anything that you like to kind of guide folks with as they're in their education process about best practices or?
Yeah, I think it's so important to experiment. So I think, I hear so many artists that'll say, I do wonder what that would mean if it were bigger or if it were blue. And I always say, do it. This is the perfect time while you're in school to really to try, and that can give you the chance. Then you'll know, like, okay, no, this work doesn't need to be larger, or it does, or focusing on one color. That's really like doing a monochromatic series is really important because this color means something, or nope, I tried it and it didn't work. So I think, just really going for it and trying. And I know sometimes that can be scary. And I know sometimes supplies and or money can be hindering for that. But I think when you have the opportunity, I think that's always something to try. And I'll talk to artists, presenting work at the Kemper or other places, and they'll say like how important it was for them, like when they were in school, to try something out. And even sometimes they'll say like, I tried this, it didn't work, but that painting is on top of this one, or so you might be able to reuse that material.
Do you have any like advice on like pricing, or like do you think pricing has a important factor in the finish,
Yeah, that is a great question. I think it is so important not to undervalue your work. So I think, keep a good tally of what you spent to make the work. And I would say, at the very least, break even. I know, of course, maybe you're buying paint and you might not, use one, complete, whatever you're using of paint to create the work. But I think it's important, not to undervalue your work. I think, be sure to look at what other artists are doing at the same, or, you know, at similar scale and similar media, and also like similar area. And I think, you know, this could be a great opportunity to talk with your professors. I'm sure many of your professors are practicing artists, so, you know, they might be able to shed some light. But yes, very important not to undervalue your work. And then it's also really great, you know, be sure to make connections and continue the connections with the people who purchase your work, because there are so many times, you know, like when I'm meeting with donors and they're like, oh, have you heard of so-and-so over at such and such place? And, you know, maybe I have, or maybe I haven't, but it's so great to have, you know, connectors, or sorry, it's so great to have collectors who can help you make connections. So, yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So within the works, because we do pull from like a specific age group, and I wanted to know if you see like a certain voice or like zeitgeist in the work that you saw, like a sign of the times almost kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to think. You know, I'm really it's hard to say, because of course COVID has been a really challenging time for everyone. In addition, I think it's also been an opportunity for people to sit with themselves and have time to be contemplative. And I think that that's something that I've appreciated in really all facets. So not only like, you know, thinking about your personal everyday and what brings you joy and or what brings you pain, but also thinking about the ways in which the future can be brighter. So thinking about issues related to women's rights, thinking about issues related to LGBTQ rights, thinking about Black lives, thinking about Black and brown bodies. And so I think that is something that I noticed in this work, is it seemed very contemplative and very forward thinking. There were, you know, a good amount of examples thinking about the way that history has been and how we can move in the future. There were depictions of bodies, which or depictions of bodies that I assumed and then later had confirmation were created by women. So thinking about the gaze. So yeah, I went on too long, but I think that that was maybe like a common thread.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I just want to mention that Marissa said to feel free to drop questions into the chat box here if you prefer. We're happy to ask on your behalf if you don't want to ask directly. So if you have any questions, please just unmute yourself or drop them into the chat box.
This is a nice intimate group, so I definitely would encourage you all to pick Jade's brain. There are no silly questions. I've got to say, Fernanda, that question about pricing is something that artists ask me on a daily basis, even when they're at their most established in their careers. It is an it's an evergreen question. And there's Jade, I think you handled that question so perfectly, because I never really have a perfect answer, because it is so drastically different across mediums. And the way that you execute your artwork too can really change the value in some ways. If you're taking 7 years to create works, you know, how do you value that? It's very difficult. It looks like, Jade, we have a question in the chat box that says, how and when did you get into curating? That's a great question.
Yeah, it is. So I have been interested in art history since, I don't know, the beginning, since I can remember. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, and my parents often took us to the IMA, which is now called Newfields. So like when I think about my childhood, I think about art. So I think I was probably, it was already, you know, like it was destined to happen. But I did go to school thinking that I would be a professor of art history. And then my sophomore year of undergrad, I took a art history class that focused on museum studies. And at the end of the year, each student was able to curate, like, you know, a small portion of the gallery. And I just really loved that. I do a lot of reading, and I think of myself as a person who, you know, tries to talk to lots of different people so that I have lots of different perspectives. And I love being able to showcase, you know, like what I'm learning or what I'm reading or what I believe or what artists believe. I love to be able to showcase that and show that to the different groups of people who would come to the museum. So that was how, and then when was like my sophomore year of undergrad.
That's awesome. I am always so interested as to how curators get into their their line of work.
Yes.
And London has a question in here. As a transitioning senior, are there any tips or suggestions for emerging artists to begin to start showing in contemporary galleries?
Yes. So I think as people purchase your work, you know, really staying in touch with collectors, really talking with your professors and sharing shows that you have, even if they're in, you know, like artist run spaces. There's no space, I believe, there's no space that's too small to see good artwork. And something that I can also say that I found really interesting with COVID is there seems to be a push of I don't know, like marketing on social media. And it could just be that I'm not like social media savvy. So maybe this was always happening, but I've been in the house. So I've been able to, you know, notice this differently. But I think, you know, really finding a way to promote yourself and keeping your social media up to date with your work. And then I am a firm believer in a good website. There have been so many times where someone will recommend an artist to me. I'll, you know, search for their website. There's nothing there, or, you know, one work and their name, or, you know, just like not enough for me to get a clear understanding of their work. So I would recommend a website. I know that there can also be a monetary cost to that as well. So I have seen some artists essentially turn their Instagram pages into websites. I guess what I think is important is just to have a visual representation of your work that's that's easily accessible. And I think that that's really what it is, you know, just being there, creating the work, showing it to people. And I think, you know, honestly, the art world is pretty small. We're all talking to each other. So being able to talk and have your work in curators' mouths and your work seen by people, I think helps with showing in galleries. You have any experience with non-conventional curatorial work? What do you mean?
Sorry. I'm curious just because I'm kind of also interested in curatorial work as well. I'm a second year Mellon Fellow at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art right now. And I'm really thinking about how we can kind of switch up or like alter like the galleries of like the white walls like we're kind of like conditioned to think about. And so I'm just curious, like, have you had any experience with like non-conventional forms of curation or like, you know, artist run spaces or like things like that? Like if there's any type of like unfamiliar kind of outside of like the standard like white cube.
So no, I haven't, but I agree that there's a real push for thinking, you know, outside of the white walls. I think something that seems to be gaining some traction or is like like sculpture parks or like outdoor spaces. And so I think for maybe both artists and curators, thinking about the preservation of that work if it's outside, and, really thinking about how your work can withstand rain, mud, children jumping on it. There's always signs that say, like, don't touch, but when it's outside and something that can be accessed 24/7, thinking about the durability of your work. And I think that that's something that curators also need to think about. And then, also thinking about the ways in which outdoor works, the conversation that makes with outdoor spaces and the people that live in those spaces, I think is an important conversation to have. I also think, I was gonna say one other thing. Sculpture. Oh, I also think that I've been noticing a real interest in like digital presentation of work and digitally curated exhibitions. I've seen them both, like, if you could come to there's a software called SketchUp that basically you can put like your wall dimensions and you can add work to the wall and, like you can virtually walk through the space. I've been seeing a lot of that. So I think that those are maybe just like two ways to think about non-conventional spaces. Did you find a 4-year degree? Oh, I feel so bad because I'm sure you all are in school. Okay. I do believe that having professors who are forward thinking and push you is invaluable. I do appreciate that things can be learned outside of the classroom, but I believe you all to be in school, and I, hope that you will continue if that's the right path for you. I'll say, there's a great handful of artists who don't have degrees in art who have found success. So if, something were to happen and you weren't able to continue on your journey of a 4-year degree, I don't think that means that you can, that you need to forget about your dreams of being an artist. It's definitely possible. That said, I do think that attending a college where there are professors that push you, where there are materials that you can use, right now as, part of the tuition that you pay, I think can be very helpful in your journey.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is a bad question, and I'm not trying to put you in a spot. But I would love to ask anyone this, but what is good art and bad art for you?
Oh man, these are zingers. Part of me wants to say that there's no such thing as bad art. Mm-hmm. That said, I know I've been to shows and I've walked out like, eh. So, maybe to piggyback off the question I was just answering, like maybe bad art is art, or maybe I won't say bad art, but art that can be pushed further. Maybe that is like maybe what I would consider is less than. Like, I think, artists are constantly asking questions of themselves, constantly asking questions of the world, of society. And I think that, those are the best forms of art, when you're really thinking about, what we can do to make the world better, and or like commentary on what is going on in the present day as contemporary artists. And then artwork that's maybe less than good would be artwork that stops short of that.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
I'd almost like to jump in, Jade, too, and just say that, like, coming back to London's question about transitioning out of university and going on to exhibiting in galleries. One of my suggestions that I often give people is no matter where you go, there are agencies like KCAC and there are agencies outside of KCAC in Kansas City that are really imperative to be a part of. One, just to have community, but also companionship and peers, especially in Kansas City, do a relatively good job of sharing resources and experience and opportunities, and showing up to those galleries that you're interested in, showing up to the openings at the Kemper, making yourself present really helps keep your work and your individuality present in our minds, so that when somebody does come to us and ask for a reference from the collectors communities, we can say, oh, I just saw London's work. You should really connect with him. I think that they have really work that would fit your collection really well. Or often gallery owners, retail and commercial gallery owners come to KCAC to see who's coming up, who's coming up to the next level, and who are they ready to collect. And they'll talk to us about the experience of that exhibition. Where do we think those artists are at in their careers? Are they ready for that next step? Like Jade said, this community is really small. So showing up, I think, is a really important part, and finding the agencies within your community that maybe aren't the Kempers and Nelsons just yet, but those agencies can really help catapult you to the next spaces.
Absolutely, yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm. By agencies, you mean like?
Just agencies like KCAC. I call us agencies as a collective. So not-for-profits. I can't even think of anything else right now. That's awful. Smaller galleries that maybe haven't quite, maybe don't have as high of a reputation as the big name galleries, maybe in the Crossroads here in Kansas City or in Chicago on Little Street. There are smaller places to begin. Just what you guys are doing right now, participating in a student exhibition, even just applying. If you don't get in, it doesn't, I mean, we still see the work. Jade still saw every single work that was presented. And there have been times when jurors have come back to me and said, that one work, it didn't get into this show, but I'd really like to know who that was, because I feel like their work would be really meaningful in another show, or I would like to make a recommendation of their work to a collector. So again, that showing up, maybe not in person, but by putting yourself out there and applying, it's really important. And that will happen beyond KCAC, jury shows, things like that. That's really important.
I have another question.
Yeah.
How did you navigate making what I would assume are a lot of hard decisions?
Oh man, yes, it's always hard. So I'll go, several times, and I'm thinking about like, oftentimes like the artist's hand, or like how much of the artist's hand I see, and if I deem it to be intentional. Like, yes, of course, there are practices in which the hand is important, and it can sometimes read as naive, and that's intentional. but I, try to read that as different from like maybe untrained. So I think that's maybe the first step. I always, this was maybe challenging for me in a different way, and that and I think that this is also maybe helpful for you all if you're like, when you apply for other exhibitions and other like jury shows and grants and things. I think I lean on artist statements and like artist written materials. I think that is oftentimes very helpful. For this process, I didn't have access to those. So this was, truly based on my eye and my interpretation of the work. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So we're running at the 10-minute mark. I wanted to ask if anyone else has any other questions. Please unmute yourself or put them in the chat box. If not, I think it's a great time to let Jade announce the winners. I know that was speaking of hard decisions, that was probably a very hard decision for you.
Yes, it really was, because I must say, every work in this show is really great. And hopefully I did say this, I had written down like, the work show exceptional skill, promise, and innovation. And I really, truly believe that. And you all made it quite challenging. And then it was also really exciting to see the works in person. I have enjoyed this COVID era where we're, viewing work on Zoom and viewing work on our screens. I also just really think there is something special and exciting about being able to see work in person. So I'll say all of your works photograph well, and then they also, translate to the 3D gallery space really well. So does anyone have any questions? If not. Okay. So let me make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat. Okay, so the winner, so first place is Cole Vajic with At the End of the Day. Second place is Kevin Hopkin with Lot 77. And third place is Kate Fromm with 4027. So congratulations to everyone. And really congratulations to everyone in the exhibition. It's really beautiful work, and I look forward to seeing what you all will do next.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jade, for taking the time and curating this exhibition. And I would just like to say thank you to all of the students for just putting yourselves out there. This is a really hard thing to let somebody jury your work. So congrats for just taking the courage and applying, putting yourselves out there, showing up, coming to the gallery, seeing your work, being present. You've all been just a joy to work with, including Jade. And it's just been, this is my favorite show. I've been doing this show for 12 years now at KCAC, and it is hands down every year my favorite show that we do. It is such a pleasure to get to meet and work with all of you, and I hope you stay in touch with KCAC and Isabella and myself, but I also deeply hope that you stay in touch with Jade. She is a great resource for you in our community if you stay in Kansas City, or if you even go beyond. And there's still 2 weeks for the show, so come in if you haven't seen it. Bring your family, bring your friends, and we look forward to seeing you at the galleries sometime soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Yes, it was so nice to see you face to face.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Marissa and Isabel.
Thank you so much, Jade. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Alrighty.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.